Alhamdulillah wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. So the next chapter that we're going through, when we're talking about the book, the Mutn Abu Shujaa, um, is we're going to be finishing up the chapter which has to do with mu'amalat, or like with transactions and things that have to do with other people, like a thing between one person and another. And of these things that we're going into here, where we recently talked about lost items and what does somebody do when they find something on the ground, or they find someone's property and they don't know where the owner of the property is. And so, similar to finding lost property is finding finding something that belongs to an actual person, or finding an actual person. So this is the next chapter that's going to be talked about, and it's called Laqeet. And of course, like the thing on the ground is called Laqeet. And so, like a Laqeet is someone who is found, like a found child without parents. And so maybe the parents are alive, and we just don't know who they are. Maybe it was an abandoned child. Maybe they don't have parents. Maybe their parents were killed. But basically, it's like an orphan, but it's a little more general. Even if the parents were alive, of course, it's still like an orphan. What do we do if we found an orphan, and we are, or like a child, and there's no father that we know about for the child. There's no any caretakers and whatnot. Then what are we going to do? So this is what the author is going to talk about in this chapter here, and he brings a couple basic principles, and we'll talk about this, and we'll move on, inshallah. So the author Abu Shujaa, rahimahullah, he says faslun, and so he says that this chapter, and this is regarding the laqit, as I mentioned. He says إذا وجد لقيت بقارعة الطريق فأخذه وتربيته وكفالته واجبة على الكفاية. And so he says, and if there is a laqit, a child that is found without any parents in the middle of the road, or like anywhere that is in a place and whatnot, if he's found, like this child is found and whatnot, of course not taking him away from anywhere, but like finding him in like an open place, or like a place that is not belonged, that's not specific to any particular individual. Then taking him, rearing him, taking him, picking him up, rearing him, and taking him into custody, or like making sure that someone is a caretaker for him, is a communal obligation. This has to be done. It has to be done by this is by the community in general that needs to take up this task. And and so this also, of course, it's not just anyone who's going to do this, but rather it needs to be someone that he mentions here. He says وَلَا يُقَرُّ إِلَّا فِي يَدِ أَمِينٍ. And so he says here that he is not left, like he is not allowed to be taken into custody except by someone who is trustworthy. And so, like, of course, this person needs to be someone who's trustworthy that takes him into custody, and of course, because of the possibility of oppression and whatnot. And so, of course, if the kid is found, this kid could have things around him or things with him, or he could be left just with next to nothing. But say there is money alongside of him, what do we do with this? And he says here, and in wujida ma'ahu mal, anfaqa alayhi al-hakimu minhu. And so, and if there is a money that is found with him, then the ruler will use it to cover his expenses. And so this is the next thing. So say he was left by someone who they thought they couldn't, or they didn't want to take care of him. Of course, this is a terrible sin, for someone to leave a child without a caretaking. And this is like an evil, very evil thing to do. And so, but say they left a bunch of money with him. They're like, okay, I'm going to leave a bunch of cash with him, or like gold or something. If this is found with him, and of course it's something that is understood to be alongside of him, then this money would be used by the ruler, like the ruler, or like the judge that is like looking into this matter. He would use this money to take care of his expenses and whatnot. And then the next thing he says here, he says, what if there's no money? وَإِن لَمْ يُوجَدْ مَعَهُ مَالٌ فَنَفَقَتُهُ فِي بَيْتِ الْمَالِ. And if there's no money with him, then his nafaqah, or like the expenses, like this is what we pay. Of course, like a wife, there's nafaqah upon the husband that he pays for the wife for her living expenses, and also upon the father is to pay for the living expenses for his kids. Of course, this has no father, so this nafaqah, where does it come from? Like the living expenses and whatnot. This comes from the Bayt al-Mal, and Bayt al-Mal is like it can be translated as the public treasury. And this was originally a place that all of the money from like the Muslim leader would come into this one place, and this would be put together in a way that whenever there was extra money from certain things, it would go into this public treasury. And then this was a place that would be used for many different aspects. But for maybe 1,000 years now, I forget exactly when it went away, but there's a time when the Bayt al-Mal got a bit corrupted because there were some leaders that were corrupted, and then it never came back to a point where it was actually plausible or like actually used. So if there's no Bayt al-Mal, then where does this money come from? In this case, this money would, like the hakim or like the ruler and whatnot, he would get loans for this, and then this would be a loan that would be paid back from the kid once he's older and whatnot, and he would pay back. And of course, this is if the person who takes him in, if he wants to do sadaqah and take care of him with his own like out of his own free will, without like calling back for the money, then he can do this. But it's not an obligation for him to do the sadaqah necessarily, unless there's no one else that's going to do this. But rather, he could, even if there is no one else that did this, he could take a note of all of the expenses, and then he could get the expenses returned to him once the kid is older, and he had paid back this loan, which is for him. And of course, this is like no one is going to be expected to like go to take all of their money for something in this way. And of course, the best thing is that there's no loan on the kid afterwards. But this is the right of the people that are taking care of. The kid has to be taken care of. So if the person needs to take loans out for the kid to be taken care of, then this kid would have to pay back the loans unless he forgave him for that. Wallahu ta'ala alam. And so this is the chapter has to do with like a found child. Also, another thing alongside of that is if a child is found in a place where there are Muslims, or even a single Muslim, and there's a possibility that this child belongs to a Muslim, then the child is a Muslim. And this is assuming that we don't know where his parents are. We found, like, we don't know the actual parents. So in this case, the child would be a Muslim if we found him in, even if it was in America. Say we found like there's an orphan in America, and there's a possibility there's Muslims in the area. There's a possibility maybe he came from a Muslim. Then he would be a Muslim. And he would be taken up, and of course a Muslim has to be taken care of by a Muslim. He should never be taken care of by non-Muslims and whatnot. And then also, and this is general for any child, like a child always follows his parents. Like if there are parents, then he follows whatever Muslim is from his family. So if this is a child and his mother and father are Muslims, he's born to a Muslim family, okay, he's a Muslim right away, and he has this ruling of Islam. And if he is if his mother is a Muslim and his father is not a Muslim, he's a Muslim. Like the child is a Muslim. If his father is a Muslim, his mother is not a Muslim, then he's a Muslim. Or say his father's not around, but his grandfather is, and then he would be like a Muslim. So in this case, he would follow his fathers, or like his mothers or fathers, and whatever one is Muslim, then he would become a Muslim from that, from looking in that way. And so this is normally how does a person become a Muslim without taking the Shahadatain? And then this, like for the child becomes a Muslim just by one of the family, one of his fathers or one of his parents being a Muslim, in this case. And this is pretty much what the author brings in regards to Laqeet. And of course this is a bit different than like say sometimes you'll hear that sometimes they'll talk about Islam doesn't do what is it called, adoption, like no, like Islam doesn't endorse adoption. Yes, Islam endorses taking care of kids. that are out there. But does Islam endorse adoption in the way that, like, the Western world says, we take this kid into custody and then we change his name, we get rid of whatever his name was or whatever his parents were, we get rid of his names and we hide this and we make him seem like he is a part of our family until one day he finally realizes that these aren't my parents. Like, of course, this is lying, and Islam does not endorse this. Of course, Islam endorses taking a kid in and taking care of them without a doubt. This is something that is endorsed by Islam. But to hide someone's lineage and to lie to the kid while they're young and say these are your actual parents, this is something that's completely against Islam. So, of course, like, this is to be understood, you know. And also to change his name stays the same. Like, if this is a kid that is taken into custody and whatnot, yes, of course, he should be taken care of with the greatest of respect and care and with mercy and whatnot. But his name would never get changed to follow the caretakers. No, his name stays as his name is. If we know who his fathers are and whatnot, then his name stays with them as his original name. And we're never allowed to change his name to hide his lineage. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Any questions before we move on to the next chapter here? Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Could the argument be made that it is a communal obligation to set up any type of sponsorship programs for, Muslim children that are in the foster care system or get taken by the state? Is there an argument to be made that we as the community in America should have some sort of way to take those kids into our custody instead of letting them be lost into the state programs?
Yeah, without a doubt. And this is a severe problem. And this is of the biggest reasons why there's dangers in living in the West is specifically because kids. Because if we have Muslim kids that are getting picked up by kuffar families, then this is basically the biggest open door into kufr for these kids, and this is it's a huge problem. Because of course kids are never allowed to be taken care of by a Muslim kid is never allowed to be taken care of by a non-Muslim, and to be thrown into that system, this is extremely problematic. Of course, if we have people that are able to look into this, like a, say, care organization, or like something that is like a Muslim organization that actually calls and says, these are Muslims, they must be taken care of by Muslims.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a way to work with this. So anything that we can do to make sure that we get the kids into Muslim families, this is important.
Okay. And my other question is, would a woman or a father, if she embraced Islam by taking her shahada, in a fiqh perspective, would her children also be considered Muslim at that point, even though they weren't necessarily born like that?
Yeah.
Or, born as official Muslim?
As soon as she takes the shahada, all of her children that are under bulugh, so if the child has already come over the age of accountability, then they don't necessarily become Muslim. They have to say it for themselves. They have to enter into Islam, they have to actually say it for themselves. But when they're under bulugh, like under the coming of age, then in this case, they follow her immediately. So this is there was a brother that I knew that he became Muslim, and he had like 3 kids, and like all of his 3 girls all of a sudden are Muslims now. It was beautiful.
Okay, and that goes for father and mother.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And even if, say, there's a grandfather that's taking care of the kids, and there's no, like, the parents aren't around, or like the parents died, especially if the parents died. Like if the parents died and there's a grandfather or grandmother that is Muslim, the kids are Muslim. All right. All right, inshallah. So the next chapter, which is the last chapter in this section, is in the fasl. He says fasl, and this is regarding al-Wadee'ah. Al-Wadee'ah is an entrusted object. So like the example of this is, say I have, or like say my friend, he had a bunch of books and he needed to leave the country. So he left the country and he said, here, hold my books for me. Because these books, of course, they're worth money and whatnot. So he told me, hold these books for me, and when I need them, you give them back to me. All right. And so this is an entrusted object that he gave me. So this Wadee'ah is something I'm doing a favor for him by holding these books and protecting them for him. And this is something that is um, ultimately he's entrusting me with these objects. And so if anything happens with this, then we'll talk about this, but he is the one who's getting the benefit from this transaction. I'm not getting a benefit from holding his objects for him. Maybe you have like maybe you're going to go on a trip or something and you have some electronics or you have some gold or something and you want someone to hold it while you're gone to make sure that nobody robs it and whatnot. Then this is something that you could give them that your special objects. And this is actually something that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he used to be known as Al-Amin. And he was known as Al-Amin in Mecca, because all of the people of Mecca, they knew that they could leave their objects with him. This is Wadee'ah. They could leave their objects with him, and he would take care of them. He would never lose these objects or steal anything from that. And so he was known as Al-Amin because they could give him these objects, and he would take care of it, and it would be safe. It would be safe with him. And even when they were trying to kill the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when they plotted to kill him, he still made a plan for after he left and made hijrah, that he left Ali radiallahu anhu to give back all of these objects to the people who were actually trying to kill him. He actually made sure that all of the Wadee'ah, which is like the plural of Wadee'ah, all of these objects were given back to the people after he left. And so he even made a plan to make sure that these got back all to the rightful owners and whatnot. And so this, of course, this is something the Prophet ﷺ used to do, and it was something that was known. And of course, we do this in general. But of course, there are some rulings in regards to what if something happens, do we have to take it or not? Then this is what the chapter is going to talk about. So the author here, he says, وَالْوَدِيعَةُ أَمَانَةٌ. And so he says the Wadee'ah, or this object for safekeeping, is a responsibility. And amana, which is something, it's a responsibility, and it's something that is this person is trusted with this object. That's what amana actually holds like a meaning of, and that this person is trusted. And this is a responsibility for him when he takes this. And he says, وَيُسْتَحَبُّ قَبُولُهَا لِمَنْ قَامَ بِالْأَمَانَةِ فِيهَا. And so he says, and it's mustahab to accept it for the one who is able to care for it responsibly. And so so if somebody knows that they have a place to store this object and they're a responsible person, then it's mustahab for this person to take it. And of the hadith that hold this that hold a beautiful meaning with this is Allah Allahu fi awni al-abd ma dama al-abdu fi awni akhihi. And so the Prophet ﷺ says in this hadith from Sahih Muslim that Allah is in the service, or like he's helping, I should say, he's helping the servant as long as the servant is helping his brother. And so this is, or like the worshiper, as long as the worshiper is helping his brother. And this is a great thing. When somebody has a Wadee'ah for someone, they're helping out their brother. And if they're helping out their brother, as long as they're holding this Wadee'ah and they're doing a service for their brother, and then Allah is going to help them out the whole time that this person is doing this. So this is, of course, has huge blessings for someone if they're holding a Wadee'ah for someone. This is the way for them to have barakah in their life and to have Allah help them out in their life and whatnot. So of course, this is of the biggest benefits for that. This hadith is amazing when someone thinks about this. If you want Allah to help you, then as long as you're helping your brother, then this is a way of doing this. Also, another way of doing this is if you give a loan to somebody, like you loan somebody out money, the whole time that you have loaned this money and this money will come back, then Allah will be in the service of you because you're serving this brother by giving this loan. And so this is also another thing that's very that's beautiful. So here in the Wadee'ah, so we talked about it's mustahab to accept it for the one who is able to care for it responsibly. And also he says وَلَا يُضْمَنُ إِلَّا بِتَعَدِّي. And it's also he's not held liable unless he is negligent or transgressive. So if he goes overboard. And what this normally when somebody is given a Wadee'ah, the basic the basic thing that he is to do with this is he is to hold it and to basically protect it. It's not for him to go use it however he wants. If he wants to use it however he wants, then this is borrowing. This is a different transaction. So and the benefit comes to the user, and so he would be the one held liable in this situation. So say someone he loans me his car, like, or and without any price and whatnot. He says, here, you can use my car and go ahead and use my car and whatnot, and when I come back you can give it back. This is not a wadee'ah if he told me to use it, but if he told me to keep it safe, then I keep it in the garage and I make sure that it's safe, and if there's anything I need to check up on it to make sure that it looks okay, then I can do that to make sure that there's nothing going wrong with it. But this is ultimately, this is to be kept safe. So if someone does something with this object and he exposes it to danger, or he starts using it and then something happens to it, then he will be the one held responsible. He'll be held liable for any damages that occurred here in this case. And so if he's negligent, say he gets this car and he leaves it out in the street and he doesn't lock the doors, and someone comes in and tears up the interior of it and steals a bunch of stuff from it, okay, then in this case he would be held liable because he didn't lock the doors, he didn't put it into like a safe space, as opposed to someone who put it in their garage and then someone broke into their garage in the middle of the night and stole it. Okay, he's not going to be held liable in this case because he did what was normally required of him. And this, like what someone normally would do, he did this. In this case, so he's not going to be held liable. Or say, for instance, when I was holding books, say there was like a flood in the building and whatnot, and then all the books got destroyed. I would not be held liable if I took care of these in a normal way. So the next thing here that he mentions, he says, وَقَوْلُ الْمُودَعِ مَقْبُولٌ فِي رَدِّهَا عَلَى الْمُودَعِ. And so he says here, the word of the entrusted person is accepted regarding him returning it to the entruster. And so what he means here is, like, what if there's a dispute between the person that this person entrusted, like the person who is the mudir, he's the person that entrusted the other person to hold it for him. So he says, this guy didn't return my property. And so whose word are we going to take? And whose word are we going to hold on to? So the qawl al-muda is maqbul. So the person who is given and entrusted this property, his word is accepted regarding him returning it to the entrustor. So the person who was given the property to hold, say someone, say I gave my, or say someone gave me a computer. All right, so this person gave me a computer, and then all of a sudden there's a dispute, and he says, you didn't give me back your computer. I said, I gave it back to him. And to the judge, who is the judge going to believe? He's going to believe me saying I gave it back to him. Why? Because first off, the person giving me the computer to hold in the first place is a check of approval from this person who's giving it, that he knows that I'm a trustworthy person. His act of doing this is basically saying, this person's a trustworthy person. I trust him enough to give him my property, to hold for me. And so he's already saying I'm a trustworthy person. So me saying I gave it back to him, I already have the person's approval that I'm trustworthy from the beginning. So me giving it back to him is already this is expected, because this person expected me to be trustworthy. So if there's a dispute and he says he gave it back, and I say, so if I said I gave it back and he says no, you didn't give it back, then I would be the one whose word is accepted in this case. And this other person would have to establish some type of proof. He would have to come up with some type of evidence that is some witnesses or something to show that I didn't give it back, or some type of strong evidence to strengthen his case, or else his word won't be accepted. So the next thing that he talks about here is, he says, وَعَلَيْهِ أَنْ يَحْفَظَهَا فِي حِرْزِ مِثْلِهَا. And I mentioned this a little bit, but he must protect it in a place that something like this would normally be protected. And so, of course, this is an entrusted object. So if I have this object, I need to put it in a place that something like this would normally be protected. Like a car, I need to put it in the garage if this is normal in that place. Or if I don't have a garage, he knows that, and then I at least have it in a driveway with lights on it, and that is a relatively safe neighborhood and whatnot. or something that normally would be there, or if it's like gold, say if it's gold or if it's jewelry, I put it in a safe, or I don't just leave it out on tables, so it needs to be in a place that something like it normally would be protected, and if not, and something happened to it, then then I would be held liable for not putting it in a place that is normally protected, and for negligence in that case. And the next thing he mentions, وَإِذَا طُولِبَ بِهَا فَلَمْ يُخْرِجْهَا مَعَ الْقُدْرَةِ عَلَيْهَا حَتَّى تَلِفَتْ ضَمِنْ. And if he's requested to return it and delays in returning it while he was able to do so, then he would be held liable. And so say the guy tells me, he's like, I want my books back. All right, he wants his book back. I need to give it back to him. So I need to give it back to him. I say, come back later. And I'm able to give it to him now, but I delay him. I don't give him back right away. Then from this time that I'm able to give it back to him until he gets it, if something happens to these books, then I'm the one held liable at this point. Because no longer is it him getting a benefit from me, but rather I am holding him back from his rights. And then if something happens, say there's a flood at this point, I'm going to be the one held liable at this. And of course, the person should give it back right away. This is a responsibility that the one holding it, he should always give it back right away as soon as he's able to give it back. Of course, if he has a valid, say he has a valid like reason for saying, or excuse of why I can't give it back to you right now, say my key, the key for the safe is with somebody, or is not with me right now, or it's a timed safe, I can open it up at certain times, and he says I want it now. Okay, you're gonna have to wait until this time. Okay, this is understandable. But if there is no valid excuse for why I didn't give it back to him, then in this case he would become liable from this point on, and until he gave it back to him. And so of course this is looking at who's the one who is getting the benefit from this. And of course it's obligatory to give back everyone's rights. If somebody asks for something, then they have to give it back. Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts about giving that. And Allah says in the Quran, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُكُمْ أَن تُؤَدُّوا الْأَمَانَاتِ إِلَىٰ أَهْلِهَا. And so that Allah orders you, and verily Allah orders you to give back the amanat, like the things that are entrusted to the people to their people, to like their rightful owners. Of course, this is like a major sin if somebody holds this back without a valid excuse. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. And so the next thing we'll go into is we're going to talk about mirath, or an inheritance. And this is basically like when we go over it in this book, of course, this is a subject that is usually discussed as a single subject by itself. And normally it would be taken in this way, as a single subject with intensive classes for someone who wants to look at this. So this book is basically just kind of an introduction to this whole science. And of course, the mirath is a science in and of itself that, yes, it's connected to fiqh, but since it has so many things connected to it, usually it has its own books that are studied in its own ways, separate. And the books of fiqh, when they bring it up, they usually bring it up for the basic principles, and then also for some of the fiqh rulings that are connected to it from the side view. Because there are definitely fiqh rulings that are connected to this from in different things that are disputed in from here and there, and who gets it. And so so from this way it would be discussed in the books of fiqh, but of course it has its own separate books with and it's best for this to be discussed in intensive course, separate looking at it. And in general, the book of mirath and whatnot, and fara'id is often what it's called. This is something that is usually discussed in a way that is almost for all the madahib. Almost all the madahib, in the general principles of this, they agree in most things. There's very few disputes in this, and part of this is because this was in the Quran in a very, very clear cut way, and the majority of the issues of who gets what in the mirath, when somebody, the inheritance laws, then the majority of these issues actually have ijma' on them. So there's very little dispute in them, which is actually of the beauty of the different chapters. This is of the ones that has the least dispute. So you can take this from almost any madhab. Say you're learning the Shafi'i madhab, and you take this from a Hanbali. It's almost exactly the same. There's very minor differences here and there, and these minor differences are like the major differences between us and the Hanbalis, for instance. They don't even have any effect in this day and age. Because we would say they go into the Bayt al-Mal. If we don't have any inheritors, then this money goes to the Bayt al-Mal. We don't have one, so where do they go? They go to the next of kin. So it's like minor differences here that that happen. But so if you wanted to learn from anyone, and there's no problem with that, especially if you're learning on a certain madhab, such as this is the Shafi'i madhab that we'll be talking about. So to go over it in general, of course, Allah gave the actual the fara'id. This word fara'id is meaning something that is set aside, or a certain portion for that is set aside. And of course, this is for mirath. Or for the inheritance. When somebody passes away, where does their money go to? And of course, the first thing that the money would go to before, like if someone passes away, the first thing that the money goes to is to pay off any debts, and also to pay for their burial expenses, such as if they need to be paid for, to be washed, and also for them to have like the cloth to cover them, and for their burial procedure, and like to pay for a plot for them to be buried in and whatnot. This is like money that gets taken off first, and then money that is owed to any debtors, this would be taken out first. And then the money that is left, then it gets looked at, and we look at, okay, where's this money that's left? We take it for the fara'id. Now, of course, if the person had any like will that they were going to give money upon their death to certain people, this comes out of 1/3 of their money. They can look at 1/3 and they can say this goes to such and such foundation, charity foundation, or this goes to the poor people and whatnot. And he can do this with 1/3 of his money, and then after this money would be taken for that, then it would go to his inheritors, like the people that inherit it. Who are these inheritors? This is what this chapter is going to talk about. And of course, the inheritors, they come about by a couple ways. One of them is by family ties. Family ties, and these family ties are either by nasab, which is like that they're connected in their lineage, like their lineage is connected, or by marriage. So like if someone is like married to someone, this is the way that this person would get that. Or if someone freed a slave, then this person that they freed the slave, they have a connection to this, which is called Wadee'ah. And this person would be like this person's Mawla, and if the Mawla didn't have any inheritors, then he would inherit from this person if he passed away, because this actually connects him. And so these are some of the things that he's going to bring up here. He's going to talk about who these inheritors are. So the first thing he mentions here, he says, Kitab al-Fara'id wal-Wasaya. And so the Fara'id are the set apart portions for people in the Wasaya. This is when he passes. This will come at the end of this book. But when this person passes, if he makes a will for such and such to get such and such money and whatnot, this is okay for him to do, and this is what's called wasiyah. And so the plural of this is wasaya. And so he says here, وَالْوَارِثُونَ مِنَ الرِّجَالِ عَشَرَةً. And so he says here that the warithuna, so he's going to break it up into the men. So he says the male inheritors are 10. So he's going to break it up first into the male inheritors. And these are the ones that will inherit. Of course, there's certain conditions for some of these. Some of these there's no conditions, and some of them there are conditions. If there's someone that's closer, then they will stop the other ones. But he's just going to talk in general. Who are the people that inherit first, and then he's going to talk about some of the people that will never be left out in any circumstance, and then some of the people that will be left out in certain circumstances, and what are these circumstances that they're left out. Because of course, if there's only so much money, that's going to be broken up with certain characteristics, and the people that are first, they will get the money, and if there's nothing, and they will sometimes block other people. So if you have a father, he's going to block the grandfather from getting money because he's the one in line from this. And if you have a son, he's going to block his grandson from getting a portion of this because he's alive. But if he's not alive, then his grandson would get it. And so we'll talk about this. So the male inheritors are 10. He says the first one, Libn, and this is the son. And he says, Wabnil ibn wa in safan. And then the son's son, like the son's son, and all the way down. So like the grandsons. And so all the way down, great grandsons, great 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 grandsons, all the way down. The son's sons, following down the sons, from the actual male line. Not following down from the woman's side, from like the sons of the daughter, or the sons of a daughter's son, so if you have a son and then you have a granddaughter from that son, now this granddaughter wouldn't necessarily follow them. It would follow the sons that come down. And of course there are things for her, but this is not the one that's being talked about here. This would come in a different way. According to the circumstance. And then the next one is wal ab and wal jad. And so he says the father and the grandfather. Wa in ala. And then also all the way up. So the grandfathers all the way up, the great grandfathers going all the way up. And of course there's some exceptions, but this is not the grandfathers. There's certain grandfathers that are left out if they come from the way of the mother. So if they're like the grandfather that is the father of a grandmother, this one doesn't necessarily get it. But if it's the father of the grandfather, okay, yes, because we're looking at the difference. We're following the male line in this way here. Of course, there's occasional circumstances where some of these will get it. And he says here, wal akhu wal ibnul akh wa in taraqa. And so he says here, and the brother and the brother's son, as far as that line goes. And in ta'akha, it means like of course like the so if you have the son of the brother, so occasionally you would have the son of the sons, you have like the nephews and whatnot that go out, but that would be connected in this way to this to the brother and his sons. So what if you have you have like this son and he has a brother and whatnot, and this would go out, and then that's what he means by ta'akha, as far as that line goes out. And so then the next one he mentions here, wal ammu wal ibnul am wa in taba'ada. And also the paternal uncle. This is the am. This is the paternal uncle, and the paternal uncle's son, which is the ibn am. As far out as that line goes. And in Arabic, there's a word for the paternal uncle, which is am, and then there's a word for the maternal uncle, which is khal, and these have different rulings. And so this is why I have the paternal uncle as opposed to just uncle in general. And also cousins. And cousins, there's not necessarily a word for cousins. It would always be linked to either ibn al-am or ibn al-khal. Like for cousins, or bint am or bint al-khal. So sometimes there's some of these words that I have to give an extra explanation because they're a little more particular, or this word is not necessarily an exact translation here, but I gave the meaning here. Or the paternal uncle's sons. So these would be his cousins. So the first ones were his nephew. It would be like his brother or his nephews, like the nephews that are the sons, as far as out as that line goes. And then this one is the paternal uncle or his sons, as far out as that line goes. So of course, like his cousins, his male cousins and whatnot, as far as out as that line goes. So say his male cousin has sons, and his male cousin died, but he has sons. So his these ones that go out, okay, there we go. Or he has like or he has like an uncle of his father, and all of these people had died, but his father's uncle. So his father's paternal uncle, this might be a person that would get it in that case, when no one in the line was left. So as far out as that line goes of the paternal uncles. And of course, there's many details. We won't go into all of these because it can get a bit confusing, but we'll just try to keep it simple to what the author here he gives. And then also the ninth one, which was zoju, and so also the husband. The husband has a portion. We'll talk about his portions depending on whether or not there's kids. And then also wal mawla al mu'tiq. And then the mawla, the person that set this person free. So mawla has there's a ton of different words for mawla. or like there's a bunch of meanings for Mola, up to I believe about 20 meanings of Mola out there. But this is of the one that is mentioned here. He says al-mu'tak, and this is the person who set the person free. So the person who set this person free, he has of course he has something that he has done for this person, and so he would be given a portion if this person doesn't have anyone else to inherit from him. And then the female inheritors are 7, and these are mentioned in the Quran. And of course, someone who wants to really get into this, there's three passages that they would memorize. They would memorize the few ayat that are in they're at the beginning of Surah An-Nisa. Yusikumullahu fi awladikum lidhakari mithlu haddil unthayayn. They would memorize this until the end of that section of the ayat. Until the end, then this will give them the basic breakdown of where all these come back to. And then there's the last ayah of Surah An-Nisa. They would memorize this. يستفتونك في النساء لا يفتيكم الله في it's the last one in امرؤ هلك ليس له أب وله أخ أو أخت. So when they take this last ayah, which is called ayat as-sayf, they would take this last ayah from Surah An-Nisa, and when you put these two together and you understand them well, then this will give you basically the pattern for understanding the rest of inheritance. So these two passages, and then of course there's a couple other things that you would have to memorize as well. And of course there's other things for someone who wants to really learn this. But these are the basic things. If a student, he takes these two ayats and he understands them very well, then this will answer all of the questions that he wants for the most part. And so the female inheritors that are mentioned in there are the first one is al-bint. And so the bint, and then also wa bintul ibn, and also the daughter of the son. So the son's daughter. These are the female inheritors. And then also he mentions here wal wal jadda. And so like the mother and the grandmother, wal ukhtu wal zawja wal mawla al mu'taqa. And also the sister, the wife, and the mawla, and this is the woman that set someone free. And so these are the ones that would inherit. And the warithun and the warithat, these are the ones that actually have they're in line right away. Like these are the ones that are actually open to getting a piece of the inheritance right up from the get-go. And then someone who isn't from these people, then they would only get something after these people have gotten their share. And this is, of course, in the case of that we don't have the Bayt al-Mal. We don't have this right now. So in this case, they would get something after these people don't have anything. And then if they were like say they were the cousins of the maternal uncles or maternal aunts and whatnot, they would fall into this afterwards. They wouldn't follow it right away. They would follow this after everyone else had got this from here. And these are the main people that will be focused on here. So then the next chapter, he goes and he says, Fasl man yarithu ala dawam. And so like this next chapter that he's going to bring here, and it's not broken up into a chapter in this, the other version that I was translating from. And so here he says, وَمَنْ لَا يَسْقُطْ بِحَالٍ خَمْسَةٍ. And so he says here that the people that are never left out in any circumstance, the people that will always get a cut of the pie here, the people that will always get something is one. He says here, these five, there are 5 people. One is the husband and the wife, a zojan. And so the zojan, the husband or the wife, they will always get something from this. Of course, it differs from one to another. We'll talk about that. And then the next one is wal abawan. So the father and mother, they will always be getting a piece of it. And then also the last of them is walad as-sulb, and also the immediate children. So like their actual children, their immediate children, not their grandchildren. We won't talk about the grandchildren, but every single time the actual children of the person who passed away, they will always have a piece. So we have if they're a spouse, they have a piece. If they're a parent, they have a piece, a immediate parent, or if they're a child, immediate child, then they will have a piece of this. This is always, of course, for these. And so then he mentions here, he says, وَمَنْ لَا يَرِثُ بِحَالٍ سَبْعَةٍ. And then those who never inherit in any case are 7. And so these are the people that will be prohibited from ever inheriting. And the first of these is the slave. And of course, the slave doesn't own money. Like the slave, he himself is money. And of course, we don't have these in this day and age. And of course, there's rulings regarding them, and they have to be taken care of like with respect and honor and whatnot. But this person, in general, he would be money, so he doesn't have money given to him. If any money comes to him, it would go to his master, and then his master would use it as he sees fit. But the slave himself doesn't get money because he basically is a form of money or a form of wealth. And so then the second one is al-mudabbar, and the mudabbar is the one who is promised freedom upon his master's death. So this person said, when I pass away, you are free. And so this is a person who's called mudabbar. Of course, this is a way of freeing slaves that the master, he doesn't want to necessarily give up the slave right now, but he will basically, he says, he's like, I want the slave to have his freedom, but I also need his help. So this is one way of doing it. So he'd say, you're free upon my death, which is basically him having a trust or a will, like a wasiyah, that this person is free upon his death. Okay, but does this person, once he dies, he was a slave, so he wasn't able, when the moment that the master died, he was a slave, so he's not able to get money. But then he gets freed. Does he get any money? No, he doesn't get any money from. He doesn't get money upon his master's death, even if he was saved from of the people that would have inherited from it. And also the third one, walad. This is also another. This is a slave woman who bore a child to the master, and she is in a special position. The walad is in a special position that she can't be bought or sold, and she has her freedom promised for her upon her master's death. She can't be sold, and so she has her freedom upon her master's death, and she can't ever be bought or sold in this case. So she is waiting for her freedom, and of course she could be married and whatnot in another, like if the master wanted her to get married and have another life with someone else, there's no problem. But if she bore a child to the master, then in this case she has her freedom guaranteed for her. And then the fourth one. The fourth one, which is the mukatab, this is also another type of slave who has an agreement to pay for his freedom. So this is also a prescribed way that's mentioned in the Quran, فَكَاتِبُوهُمْ إِنْ عَلِمْتُمْ فِيهِمْ خَيْرًا. And so like that Allah tells us to give them the mukataba, which is a writing agreement that this person is going to pay off. He's going to pay off. He's going to pay for his freedom on a certain amount of months. So he has a couple of months, maybe it's a couple of months, saying he needs to pay so much money and work for his freedom, and if he pays this money in this amount of months, then he gets his freedom. And so this is called mukatib. So he's working for his freedom, and he made an agreement with his master, and it's like mustahab for the master to give him this if he knows that this person's a good person, and then he's able to take care of himself and whatnot. Then it's mustahab for the master to make an agreement for his slave to earn his freedom and pay for that. And so if there's a person who's a mukatib, he doesn't get money because he's still technically a slave. All of these go back. These four all go back to the first original one, which is a slave. If you would have said just a slave, it would encompass all of this. So the next ones are different categories. And so the next one is wal qatil, the murderer of that person. So if you have someone who murdered the person so that he could get inheritance, no, Islam says no. You tried to get something in an incorrect way, so you are going to be completely prohibited from getting any benefit from that. And of course, Surah Al-Baqarah, the name of the Surah Al-Baqarah actually goes back to the story of the people of the tribe of Israel, the Bani Israel, that there was a person who wanted to, from the people of Bani Israel, he wanted to inherit from someone, so he killed him so that he can inherit from him. And so then when they were told, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُكُمْ أَن تَذْبَحُوا بَقَرَةً, and so like then Allah told them after the person was killed, like the story is the person was killed, and they found this person. They wanted to know who's the person who killed this man. And of course, the person that was killed had lots of wealth, and so Allah told them to slaughter a cow, and they're like, what cow? And then like, oh, what are his traits and whatnot? And then once they slaughtered the cow, they found the cow and they bought him with its price in gold. They found the cow, and then Allah told them to فَضْرِبُوهُ بِهَا. And so فَضْرِبُوهُ بِهَا. So like to take a piece of the cow and to hit the dead cow that they slaughtered, to hit the man who was dead with the piece of the cow, and then this man came alive and told him who was the person who killed him. And so this is like a miracle, of course. And so he told them, oh, so-and-so killed me. And he was actually of the people that was of his inheritors. And he was trying to get the wealth. So, of course, in this case, you see that this, of course, is not a new, like this type of motif is not a new motif, that people would kill someone so that they would inherit from them. But Islam, if anyone killed this person, you're not going to get it. Even if, like I translated al-qatil here as murderer, but if you have a son who testifies against his father in a court of law that his father did something that will entail his death, this son, because he is the cause of the death of his father, he's not going to get a piece of the inheritance from us. He will be prohibited from it because he is the cause of this person's death. Or if a son accidentally killed his father, say he was driving a car and whatnot, he was the cause of his father dying in the car accident. In this case, the son is not going to get the inheritance because he's the cause of his father dying. He's not going to get an inheritance from his father, from us. It prohibits him. Whoever killed the person that he's supposed to inherit from, he doesn't get a piece of the inheritance. Of course, there's debates in this and whatnot in some of the circumstances. But of course, the murderer, without a doubt, he doesn't get any of this from that. And this is also mentioned in a hadith. And then the next one is wal murtaddu. And so an apostate. So and also this goes back to the number 7 as well. Wa ahlu millatain. And so the apostate and the people of two different religions. And so this also there's a hadith that talks about that that a Muslim doesn't inherit from a non-Muslim, and a non-Muslim doesn't inherit from a Muslim. So in this case, there's no inheriting back and forth between these two. So if someone is a Muslim and they die, their money does not get split between their non-Muslim family. Or if a non-Muslim died, then the Muslim is not going to ask them for their inheritance. As like it won't be like the actual inheritance that is prescribed for them, that they have a legal right to. Of course, if the person wants to give them money just from giving them money, this is something else. But it's not like they have this legal right to the money. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. And so, of course, the apostate, the Shafi'i madhab, in the view of the apostate's wealth is put on hold. So if he comes back to Islam, then it's now we see that his wealth is his wealth, and all of his transactions are valid. But if he doesn't come back to Islam, then his wealth would be considered fate, which is this will come up in the last chapters. But it's basically the wealth of the Muslimin. It goes back to the Muslims and like their general good, and it's not his wealth. And so all of this would be taken back by the Muslims, as their wealth would be spread out, not between his family. It would be spread out. If this person died as a murtad, say he was a murtad in like a place of Muslims, and like a land of Muslims, then in this case his wealth would be taken back to the public good, to the public, not to his family, but back to the public, to like the public treasury and whatnot. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam.